Hello everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this YouthActionNet webinar, part of the Living Leadership series brought to you with support from the Sullivan Laureate Foundation and the American Express Foundation. The Living Leadership series focuses on highlighting the organizational issues leaders face, as well as the social innovations being employed by young social entrepreneurs from across our growing worldwide network. My name is Jessie Ellisberg. I'm a program manager for YouthActionNet, and I'll be serving as your session facilitator. Today's webinar is entitled The Accidental Entrepreneur. Our featured presenter is Rajeeb Dey, founder and CEO of Internships, and he'll be talking to us today about his journey into entrepreneurship and sharing some key points for startup. Now it is my privilege to introduce you to today's presenter, Rajeeb Dey. Raj is the founder and CEO of Internships, a platform for students and graduates to find internships and jobs in over 5,500 startups and SMEs, for which he was awarded the O2X Young Entrepreneur of the Year accolade and named the world's youngest young global leader by the World Economic Forum in 2012. Raj is also a co-founder of Startup Britain, the national campaign to inspire, celebrate, and accelerate entrepreneurship in Britain, launched by the Prime Minister in 2011 and supported by the government. He is recognized by the Evening Standard as one of the year, honored with the Queen's Award for Enterprise Promotion in recognition of his work in the entrepreneurship sector for over 10 years. He also happens to be a YouthActionNet Global Fellowship alumnus from the class of 2008. Welcome, Raj.
Thanks so much, Jessie, for the kind introduction, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on which time zone you're in. It's good afternoon here from the UK. In today's talk, I'd really want to share with you my journey as what I call an accidental entrepreneur. Believe it or not, I didn't necessarily set out to be an entrepreneur, and everything that's kind of happened has just kind of happened by accident. I'll explain to you what I mean by that as we go through the presentation. So today I want to cover with you how I got started on my journey, what we do today as a company at Internships, the lessons that I've learned along the way, some of my broader kind of ambitions and my mission around entrepreneurship, and then give you the opportunity to ask some questions that you might have around starting your own business or scaling up your own venture, as well as some contact information should you have any further follow-up questions for me after the presentation. So my entrepreneurial journey started off at the age of 17. There's a picture here, which is, I can tell you now, is not my bedroom, but it is for a TV show called Bedroom Britain. It was a show on Channel 4, one of the major broadcasters in the UK, who was looking for entrepreneurial talent, who was doing, young people doing entrepreneurial ventures based out of their bedroom. And at the time, I was working on an initiative called the English Secondary Students Association, which is now known as Student Voice. I felt that whilst parents, teachers, governors and head teachers all had national bodies giving them a voice in the education system, no one was really listening to the customer within the education system, which in my mind was the school student. So there was no body giving the 11 to 19-year-olds a say about the education which they were experiencing. So I was put in touch with an organization called Unlimited, UNLTD, which is the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs, and I went to them with my idea to set up an organization run by students and for students, and they gave me a Level 1 award, which was a grant of £5,000 to really kickstart my idea and to make something happen. And that's when the reality really kind of set and struck, because it was all well and good having the idea, but then when the money hit the bank account, the reality struck that actually now I really have to do something. And at the time I didn't necessarily associate with the term entrepreneur or social entrepreneur. I just felt that there was a need to do something, and I heard of the fact that actually most countries in Europe had national secondary student organizations working to give them a voice, and I wondered that why we didn't have something similar in the UK. So that was really how my entrepreneurial journey got started, with that seed of an idea and that £5,000 grant. Subsequently managed to attract further funding, and that for which I received the YouthActionNet Global Fellowship Award at the same time. I then went into university. I studied economics and management at Oxford. I didn't take a year off between my kind of school education and the university. I went straight into it, but I found myself being absorbed running ESSA, or Student Voice as it's now known, and not really engaging very much with university life. And it dawned on me that actually my time at university is going to pass quite quickly without me really having made connections or really got involved in the wider extracurricular activities. So I came across a student organization called Oxford Entrepreneurs, and it was a society for student entrepreneurs at the university. And they had an opening on their committee for the role of an external relations officer. And actually, other than the president, I think it's probably the best role, because the job description that we had for that role was effectively to schmooze and network and bring on corporate sponsors and speakers and really be the external facing ambassador for the organization. So I did that in my first year at university, and then I entered the second year, and then the opportunity to become president came up. And so the business school, the Said Business School at Oxford, where a lot of the activity took place, said to me, would I like to take a sabbatical and take a year off of my degree to really focus on running the society full time. And I happily took on that challenge, and Oxford Entrepreneurs really grew to become the second largest student organization at university, second to the Union, with 7,000 members, and it was a full-time job for me to run the society. And running the society was very much like running your own business, because I had a committee of nearly 18 fellow students. I had a substantial budget to manage, and I had to go out and attract sponsorship from brands who wanted to advertise to our members or be associated with the society. So it really did give me a lot of the skills and experience I needed to then subsequently equip me in running my own company. And then, as you can see in the photo there, at the time it was Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, and there are some people there which, if anyone's from the UK, you'll recognise. They're from a TV show called Dragon's Den, which I think in the US is called Shark Tank. So well-known entrepreneurs that I would get to interact with in my role as president of Oxford Entrepreneurs. And it really actually gave me the inspiration and idea for my current venture, which is internships, because I found myself being approached by startups and small businesses on a daily basis, really, who wanted to advertise jobs to our members, but they didn't have the brands of the large corporate banks or the Goldman Sachs or the McKinseys who you would normally go and see, who are exhibiting on campus and telling you about their job opportunities. These startups and smaller companies didn't have the time, the money, or the brand kudos to really attract talent. So internships, again, it started by accident. It wasn't ever meant to be a business, but I thought to myself, whilst aspiring bankers, lawyers, and accountants do internships, what is there that an aspiring entrepreneur can do other than setting up their own business? So I said, okay, let's create a new word, let's call it internships, and let's connect young people to startups and entrepreneurial internships. And that's kind of the genesis of the word and how it came about. But as I said, it wasn't ever meant to be a business. It was a very simple listing site just for Oxford students to connect to these opportunities. And it was actually, by the time I'd graduated in 2008, was the start of the graduate unemployment crisis. Lehman Brothers had just crashed, and it was a very difficult economic climate. And I thought to myself, actually, there is a gap here that needs to be filled, because in the UK at least, there's 4.8 million small businesses, but rarely do you ever see those businesses on university campuses, or do young people know about the opportunities that exist within them. So today we work with over 5,500 startups and fast-growing businesses from a range of different countries, and we help them find talent. And these are in all types of sectors and industries. A lot of them are within the internet and tech kind of companies, but the functions are very broad in sales, marketing, all sorts of different functions through the platform. But one of the key things and the ways that I've been able to grow the business has really been through the use of partnerships. So actually one of the biggest breaks I got early on, when I was actually still working out of my bedroom for internships, was a contract with Santander Bank. So on the left-hand side you can see a screenshot there. I had basically met one of the board members of the bank, who was discussing with me that their desire to create an internship program which would bridge a subset of their business banking customers to their university clients, the students who have student accounts with them. And so it was actually good, right place, right time, good luck and fortune that we were kind of sitting together at this event, and they commissioned me and Internships to create a platform which was called Santander Internships. And that really, and I'll come back to this later about the importance of networking, but it was really that very senior level connection and buy-in, and the person who really believed in me and my idea, which gave me that break and that sense, that credibility to have such a flagship customer as a startup. And a bank is actually a difficult organization to work with due to the various kind of issues around procurement and security and things that they have. So actually to be able to have them, Santander, as a kind of a flagship customer was a great kind of kickstarter for us. And then our current largest client is Telefonica, the telecoms company. So they're known as O2 in Europe, and we are their talent partner for Europe for a program called WIRA. So WIRA is the world's biggest corporate accelerator program run by Telefonica. So they invest in startups by giving you money, space, and mentoring. And so they were discussing with us about how can we give these startups talent, because one of the biggest things that inhibits the growth of a company is one is access to money, but the other is access to people. And so we have created a dedicated talent platform to connect all of the startups in Europe to students and graduates who want to work there. And again, this is an example of a partnership where Simon Devonshire, who is the director for WIRA in Europe, used to be the head of small business marketing at O2. And you heard Jesse mention that I was awarded the O2X Young Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2009. So effectively, it was an introduction and a contact I'd made back in 2009, which then led to a partnership and a contract being signed in end of 2012. So 3 years later, Simon had obviously changed roles, but we had kept in touch. He knew about what we were doing and was keen to work with us. So again, it re-emphasized, I want to stress the importance of keeping a strong and vibrant kind of network, keeping in touch with people, because obviously people change careers, they go on to do new things, but there are plenty of opportunities to work together as roles change. And this partnership has in fact enabled us to enter new markets, because as a result of the work we're doing with WIRA, we're now operating in UK, Ireland, Germany, Czech Republic, and next year we'll also be operating in Spain. So what I've learned in doing all of this is actually you're not going to have all the answers from day one, and you have to be comfortable with uncertainty. And I think a quote from Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, really sums it up. And he says that entrepreneurship is essentially jumping off a cliff and assembling the plane on the way down. And this really does sum it up for me, because you sometimes, as I said, you're not going to have the answers. You sometimes have to make it up as you go along. And if you're the type of person that has to have everything laid out and planned to the minute detail, it may not be for you, because ultimately the business world, or the world that we live in, is constantly evolving. It's turbulent and things are changing all the time. So the ability to be agile, to be able to adapt and constantly look at your proposition and see how you are actually able to serve the changing needs of the market is a really essential skill. And by no means has it been plain sailing. For me, I typed in the word catalogue of errors into Google image search, and this kind of came up. And again, from 2009, which was when I established the company formally, Internships, to I'd say the first couple of years, really I'd made a whole series of mistakes. Mainly around not understanding the value of equity in a business, giving away a large percentage of the company to people in exchange for services, which at the time were around creating the internet platform, and that was a big mistake. And in retrospect, so I actually spent a couple of years really cleaning up the mess that I'd made. And if I kind of did it all over again, I would have invested the time and energy to really make sure that I had a technical co-founder or a CTO from the outset, because ultimately, as an internet and a web-based business, that is our product, and it's really essential that we have the kind of skills, and that would have helped me probably in speeding up the development of the company. But I'm also the type of person that doesn't have any regrets, and I always think that things happen for a reason, and I've made, whilst I have made some big mistakes, I've learned a lot from them, and I don't think I'd have it any other way. Another thing I've noticed that since 2008, when I graduated and entered the job market, entrepreneurship is very much in vogue, and so this slide kind of shows you just some of the media outlets that have covered the work that we've done at internships, and this is without any use of a PR agency or anything. It's very much positioning yourself as an entrepreneur or the company, and really understanding how what you do is relevant to the wider agenda. So the wider agenda right now, there's a strong discourse around youth unemployment, around entrepreneurship, and given that internships is all about kind of entrepreneurial businesses and helping young people find jobs and then ultimately inspiring them to also create their own business, this very much captured the imagination of the press and enabled us to get some good publicity, which again is also very good at building up the credibility, because as a startup, as I mentioned, it's hard to get noticed, and one of the ways is to get a flagship client like a bank or Telefonica, but the other way is to get coverage in the press and also get your customers to really evangelize and speak about what you do. The other bit, and again I go back to unashamedly the issue of networking, we were able to get some high-profile celebrity clients of ours. So again, the two gentlemen on this slide are from that TV show Dragon's Den, the equivalent of Shark Tank, and in the middle you've got the pop star Lily Allen, and they have all advertised opportunities for their various businesses through our platform. And in the case of Peter Jones on the left and James Khan on the right, it was very much through the connections I'd made in my role as president of the Entrepreneur Society back at university that they got to know me, they got to know the business, and that again helped build the kind of credibility and the kudos of us as a business. The fact it always helps to have a bit of celebrity endorsement on in terms of what you're doing. So in terms of the key kind of takeaways for startups and the lessons that I've learned, here's a summary kind of slide, and the first one is just get started. And I say a lot of people suffer from what I call analysis paralysis, and so what I say is don't be paralyzed by possibility. Yes, it can be quite daunting, and as I said, you're not going to have all the answers from day one, but the key is just to get started and to learn as you go along, and to be agile, and to keep iterating, keep adapting your proposition, and just get something out there in the world of technology that's known as your minimal viable product, just something small that you can test your assumptions and get some feedback. The second, and I've said this time and time again, is about leveraging your connections, and you might not have any connections right now, and I didn't have any connections when I started out at university or at school, but it was important that I went out and spoke about my work and managed to make those connections. And so some people find networking to be a scary concept and often frown upon the term, but actually, as cliched as it sounds, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and I found that to be very true in everyday life. The third thing is about finding your niche and starting with a problem that you want to solve. So in both cases with Student Voice and ESSA, it was a problem that I felt as a school student that we as the customers didn't have a voice, and likewise with internships as a university student, I felt that there was nothing out there to expose you to the world beyond the world of corporates, and we as a business are also kind of evolving, but that was where we started in terms of our niche. It's starting with entrepreneurial companies, and so it's important for you to find your niche and starting with a kind of pain point and a problem that you want to solve. The fourth point is about sharing your knowledge, and so it's about kind of being open with when people ask you for help, to kind of share what you know and not be precious. And the fourth and fifth point are linked. So it's about just as much as you can help other people, you should feel comfortable in asking for help. Time and time again, I meet entrepreneurs that are quite protective about their idea. They feel that if they say too much, someone might steal their idea. And actually, what I say is that ideas are actually cheap. It actually comes down to how you execute on your idea. So I wouldn't feel scared about sharing your ideas and getting feedback, because you actually never know who that person might know, who they might be able to connect you with. That person you're speaking to might be a future client, and so and be very generous as well in helping other people. I'm constantly trying to connect people that I know to each other, and whilst that may not serve me directly, it's just the kind of person I am, and I find that it pays dividends in the long run. And if you can help someone just by making a simple introduction, that will come round. That good karma is going to come round for yourself at some point as well. And then moving on, as the company grows, we have faced new challenges. I mean, this photo was only taken a few months ago, but it's already dated. We've got new people joining the team. The team's growing. So for me, that's the next big challenge. So obviously, starting off in my bedroom on my own was one thing, but then having responsibilities of managing people, having to think about HR issues and developing them brings new challenges, but at the same time, new opportunities. So this is a photo from our office. It's a stationery cupboard which we've just made into a learning wall, and on the left hand side it says I would like to learn about, and on the right hand side it says I can teach about. And what we realize is, whilst we have a very young team, generally most people in the company are fresh out of university and graduates, they have a lot of skills that they can then teach each other. So it's the peer-to-peer learning and creating a learning atmosphere where we encourage people to take time out to learn new skills, access online resources, and really constantly develop themselves. But it's also really important that you know, as an entrepreneur, your limitations. So I know that I'm particularly good at maybe the business development, the marketing, the outward-facing work, whereas I'm not that strong on operations or finance or some of the more HR issues. And so one of the key people I brought on was my COO, Ellen, who has a lot more experience than me, having worked over 10, 15 years in corporates. She brings that kind of skill set. So it's about being self-aware about what you don't know, and then seeking out knowledge and resource and help around you. So I've recently been on a program from Goldman Sachs called 10,000 Small Business Scheme, through the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders initiative. We got the chance to go to the Harvard Kennedy School for a 2-week module on public leadership. The photo there of the crazy guys in sunglasses are a bunch of London tech entrepreneurs, and we're all part of a mailing list where we just send questions to each other about issues or concerns or opportunities, and it's about that peer-to-peer support. So as I said, you're not going to have all the answers, but don't think that you are alone in this journey. There's plenty of help out there. So in terms of my wider mission, I am, aside from running my company, I also do a lot around promotion of entrepreneurship. I co-founded, as you heard, a campaign called Startup Britain, launched by the Prime Minister in 2011, which is really to create a national campaign to inspire and accelerate entrepreneurship up and down the country, and not just for young people, but people of all ages, to really look at entrepreneurship as a viable and rewarding career path. Recently, there's also been the Startup Loan Scheme, launched by the government, of which Internships is a partner, to really give people small amounts of money to get them started on their entrepreneurial endeavor. And I suppose longer term, what I'd like to do is really change the conversation that happens around dinner table. So you're all familiar with a conversation which is when you go to a dinner party, they say, what do you do? And you've got the doctor, you've got the lawyer, you've got the accountant, and then you've got someone like me, the entrepreneur. And so when I get asked a question, say entrepreneur, you often get met with a very glazed expression and often a sense of pity, where they actually think that you didn't necessarily get a proper job, which is why you're doing what you're doing. And so this is kind of what I'm looking at challenging, which is actually entrepreneurship and doing your own thing is a proper job. It's a job and a career path which should be celebrated. It's something we should be encouraging and supporting, because ultimately the wealth and the job creation is going to come from entrepreneurs in the economy. So 5 things that I would say not to do would be underestimating the power of your team, and having the right people around you. So I made the mistake, as I said, of not having a CTO or technical co-founder from the outset, which was a big mistake. So I'd encourage you to think about augmenting your skill set with the right people. Don't have to demand perfection from the start. So especially if you have an online or tech product, I mentioned the minimum viable product. The key is to get something out there, get feedback, and be constantly improving it. Because if you're spending a whole year developing a product or a service and you wait for the grand reveal, chances are that the economy and things have moved on and someone has beaten you to it. So it's important that you kind of lay your stake in the ground, and you show people that this is what you're doing, and encourage them to come to you and give you feedback. Thirdly, be careful. I did talk about the importance of partnerships, but don't waste time on chasing every single opportunity. Be quite rigorous in terms of the kind of people and organizations you partner with. Your time is very precious, and I did spend a lot of my time running around doing meetings which in retrospect probably weren't that useful. So really think about how you are using your time and really focus your energy. Link to number 4 is don't lose focus on your product. Ultimately, if your product or what you're selling is not up to scratch, everything else you could forget about, and so have laser sharp focus on that. And as I said before, don't be overly protective over your ideas. It's not the case of someone who will be stealing them. I found in more cases than not, by sharing the ideas, I've got some constructive feedback, I've got introductions, and as you said, you never know who that person might know who can then help you in the journey. So with that all being said, and going back to Reid Hoffman's quote earlier, the question for you all on this webinar is, who's ready to jump? So thanks for listening, and now I invite you to ask any questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Raj. Great information to share, and also just to follow up as a reminder, we're getting some questions, but please feel free to keep putting questions into the organizers and panelists, and we'll see how many we can answer. So I have a couple I wanted to start with, Raj, and the first was just a little bit about the details of how internships works. Wondering how many people were on your team when you actually started the organization, and then also do you coordinate internships for people just locally or internationally as well?
Okay, so taking the first one, in terms of when I first started internships, it was literally just me, and as I mentioned, in terms of the mistake I'd made, I had outsourced the development of the web platform to an agency who had in exchange taken a percentage of the business. Now, if I did it all over again, I would have changed that and brought the technical development in-house, and that's eventually what I had to do. But when I first registered the company in 2009, it was just me. I made those mistakes, and as I said, it took me a couple of years to sort that out. So it was really in September 2011 that I kind of sorted all of that mess out and started to bring on key team members. So one of the first hires was a lead developer to build the platform in-house, and the other person was my COO, and then the fourth person was someone to help me on business development. So after spending a couple of years on my own, making mistakes and getting the concept out there, bringing on initial clients, it took some time before we started getting the original first 4 members of the team. And in terms of the second question around local or international, right now we have actually had companies from 20 different countries on the platform, but we don't actively market ourselves outside Europe, and we're currently, our major focus is UK, Ireland, Germany, Czech Republic, and then early next year will be Spain, just because of the work we're predominantly doing with our clients at Telefonica. But the challenge that we have is, as an online platform and a marketplace, there's always an issue of supply and demand, and so we find ourselves with lots of demand in in say the US, but in order to enter the US market, we would need to raise significant amounts of capital and address that market properly. And so it's definitely something that our ambition is to enter new markets, but we have to do that in a phased kind of manner. And right now we're just solidifying our kind of presence in other European markets before looking more broadly.
And just to clarify, when you're talking about the in-house platform, that's the platform that you're using to match young people with internship opportunities, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Great.
And also now obviously we have our internal development team, so we also build talent platforms for Santander or Telefonica or other clients who we manage programs on behalf of them as well.
And you mentioned the challenge of starting without having that technology person as part of the team, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to besides that particular skill set, which of course makes sense for the platform that you're using, what are the other kind of core skills that you found to be really, really necessary for that team to really get going?
So for me, it was around the more operation side. So it was around finance, the business planning, the modeling, the human resource, HR kind of function, contracts, legal, everything that a COO or an operations person would do. I knew that I was lacking in those kind of skills, and not just that, it's just I wouldn't enjoy them and it's not my strength. And so I think it's important to know where do your strengths lie, and it's not possible for one person to be great at everything, and it's best to focus on where you think you add the most value. And so for me, I know that I add the most value when I'm out and about talking about the business, marketing, bringing in new clients. That's my personal strength, but doing more of the product management and the technical and financial side is not my strong point. So Ellen, my colleague, manages that aspect of it. So it's really important that you think yourself about where are your strengths and interests and how can you augment the other areas that you need in a founding team, whether that be around technology or operations or marketing, business development, depending on where your own strengths lie.
Great. And I'm really interested, so kind of going back to an earlier part of your story when you were talking about all the effort that you were engaged in the university community, and just wondering about the kind of thoughts on how to balance different kind of priorities or necessities. So if people are interested in starting up an organization, but they have a day job that they don't want to leave just yet, or if they're just trying to balance all these different kind of priorities. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, in the UK, we hear the concept of there's obviously the 9 to 5 job, but then there's the 5 to 9 in the evening where people are working on a side project, setting up a venture, and actually you can do both side by side. So if you're not ready to take the leap and set something up straight away, and you're in a job right now, you can, especially if it's a tech-enabled venture, you could if you wanted to, look at outsourcing or using freelance developers, kind of sites like Odesk or Elance, or finding kind of people to kind of create a product for you, which you could then test out. I'd say that the downside of that is obviously you're never going to, without putting your full commitment into it, you're not there to get the kind of results you would want. So doing something half-hearted is not great, but at the same time balancing kind of commitments, and if you have other commitments and you're not ready to kind of cut that off, then it is possible to do things on the side. If you're a student, I would thoroughly recommend that you do something over and above your degree, because the job market is the way it is. You simply will not be walking into a job out of university, and so even if you do not intend on setting up your own business, if you have dabbled in a project or something entrepreneurial, it will help you be more employable, it will look great on your CV, and you'll gain and learn new skills. And so it is possible to kind of balance, and it's about making the time, being more sensible with how you use your time. As I said, I managed to set up an organization whilst doing my A-levels, and then went straight into university, didn't take that kind of time off, and then obviously I took a year off to run the Entrepreneur Society full time, but it's really about good time management, and I think as an entrepreneur you really need to develop that skill set, and there is no concept. I think the whole work-life balance thing doesn't really exist as an entrepreneur, and ultimately I don't think it necessarily should, because I don't necessarily see a clear distinction between my work and my life. My life and my work is a big blur, because ultimately it's something that I've kind of created and I love, and if I didn't love it I wouldn't do it and I would stop doing it. So I never have an issue of counting the hours and thinking I'm working too hard or I need to go on holiday, because I'm loving what I'm doing. And so yes, it's possible to take some baby steps if you want to do it in the evenings or weekends, or partner up with other people, or even try some working with startups on the side just to get some experience. That's also possible if you're not ready to make the full leap or take that jump, as I mentioned at the end.
Great, and actually to follow up on that point, for people who maybe feel like they're not quite ready to take the full leap, or even people who think that they are, but they're not sure what tools they should take with them to build that airplane on the way down, what do you think some of those necessary tools are?
Well, obviously I'm biased in terms of the nature of what we do as a business, but I can genuinely say that working in a startup will probably equip you the most in terms of anything you will do, because if you're not ready to launch your own business, the ability to learn in someone else's company and sit alongside the founder, CEO, look at the challenges, see what's involved, and I mean everyone in our company gets to talk to me, know what I'm doing. It's a very flat structure. So I think if you're just graduating, you're kind of thinking about, do I launch my own thing? Do I work for a company? What do I do? I would thoroughly recommend looking at working in the startup environment to kind of get that experience. And obviously there's a whole heap of kind of blogs and industry-specific things you could be following. So if you're in tech, then one of the major blogs is TechCrunch, where you can read about all the new kind of innovations. There's also a great blog called Springwise, which shows you all the latest kind of innovations around the world in all different kind of industries. They featured us when we first launched back in 2009, and that led to some great coverage for us and a very global audience. So I'd subscribe to blogs, I'd follow kind of people that inspire you on Twitter, who are in your industry, and then ideally get some experience in a startup environment.
And do you think that it's things like developing a business plan, doing kind of market surveys or feasibility studies, do you think that these are also tools that would be necessary, or does it kind of depend on what you're doing and where you're at? It
totally depends on what you're doing and where you're at. So obviously if you are doing something which has a high capital requirement and you're going to need to ask for millions of pounds or dollars, then someone is going to want to see a business plan that you've really thought through that. If you're doing an internet and tech-based venture, starting up can actually be pretty cheap. And so I think the most effective thing to do is just to, as I said, try something. So in our case, we had a limited beta period where just a few hundred companies were allowed to be on the platform, but enabled us to test out the appetite, get feedback, and so you can launch a prototype of your product or service. And market research is kind of helpful, but I go back to my kind of takeaways before, and I said about analysis paralysis. I think that far too many people I've met end up getting bogged down into trying to plan every minute detail of everything, and in reality what you'll find is if you do a business plan, it will go out of date in a few months. You probably if even that. I mean, you realize when you start doing something, the reality of life and business is very different to what you probably planned. And so whilst it's good to have an overall compass and a sense of direction and travel, and especially if you're asking people for money, they're going to want to know how you're spending it. I would just caution you to not be too obsessed with creating a magnificent 50-page document which no one will read. But thinking through some of the big issues like market research, a SWOT analysis around the kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, who else is in the market, and how are you going to do something which is different, what is your unique selling point. The key ingredients of a business plan are important to think about or have in the back of your mind when you're starting your venture.
Great. I was hoping that you could also speak a little bit to the kind of income generation model that internships uses, whether students are paying to find internships or whether employers are paying, whether the partners that you provide services for, how does that work?
Yep. So this is the beauty of a tech startup, is that you can change and adapt your business model. So when we first started, it was totally free. As with most services, it's important to get the liquidity on the platform, get the companies, get the students. So in the beginning, no one was paying, and later we introduced a payment model where companies pay to list. There are 3 different options where they can list, and depending on the amount of exposure, whether they want to be in our newsletter or social media, they pay more. So there's 3 kind of packages, and that's for the startup and small business market. And then corporations like Santander or Telefonica commission us to create talent platforms and programs and to market them and manage them over multiple years and multiple territories. So they're kind of contracts and annual recurring revenues from that. Now we are in the midst of evolving our proposition. We're looking at how we're going to increase the amount of interest from larger employers. So we're in 2014 going to be evolving our business model and proposition, which enables us to adequately service the full breadth of the employer market. And we're exploring what they call a SaaS, software as a service kind of model, a subscription-based product, which would enable companies to have permanent profiles on the platform and tap into top talent.
Great. I also wanted to follow up, since you spoke about the importance of networking and particularly kind of keeping those connections alive and nurturing your network. What are some of the kind of nuts and bolts of how you keep that network living and expanding?
So, I mean, one simple and obvious one would be to use a tool like LinkedIn to just keep track of the people you're meeting. When you get someone's business card, make a note on the back of it of where you met and maybe some key points of things you discussed, and remember to follow up with them afterwards. Also, I find myself constantly making connections. It's just the type of person I am in my mind. Whenever I meet someone, I always think about who would they benefit talking to, and I find that by making introductions to other people in my network, it then reminds your network of you indirectly because you facilitate an introduction. Now you obviously have to exercise discretion in terms of the numbers of introductions and the quality of the introductions, because some of these people are extremely busy, and you have to think about, is there going to be value both ways, and are they going to be grateful for that introduction? So you have to be discreet, but that's one way. Also, a friend of mine here hosts his own kind of get-togethers for his kind of network, so he will periodically invite a group of people in his network to a drinks event, and then ask them to bring one other person who's in a totally unrelated field to this event. So basically you can expand your network by attending these kind of events or hosting your own event, and keeping and finding a kind of touch points and ways of reminding your network about what you're doing. Some people choose to send out updates on LinkedIn. I don't do that myself. Other ways would be using other social media tools, whether that be Facebook or Twitter, following people that you're interested in talking to or engaging with on Twitter, engaging with what they're saying. And so really it's about leveraging the kind of social media tools that are out there and not being afraid at an event to just go up to a random person and really challenge yourself to make sure that you speak to at least 3 new people. Don't stick around with people that you already know and that you've gone to the event with. In a way, it's actually better if you go to an event and you don't know anyone, because it forces you to really make those new connections.
Thanks. These are some really great ideas. And in talking about kind of your experience with going out there and reaching out to new potential partners and building your network kind of purposefully, anything that kind of lessons learned about things that didn't work when approaching potential partners?
I've not had that kind of experience, because I think the key thing to remember is when you're meeting people, it's not to think of it as a transaction. It's not to think of someone, not to speak to them with the pure aim of trying to get something out of it. And I think if you do that, you will fail in general, because it's, first of all, it's not good to kind of do that. But secondly, you simply don't know who that person knows, what really is their background, and actually someone who on paper might seem totally irrelevant to you might turn out to be the best contact you've ever made, because they might happen to be the husband and wife of someone who, or son or daughter of someone who is actually very relevant to you. So in every connection or person or event I've gone to, I always go with an open mind, because, and actually it's often good, I actually like attending events which have nothing to do with my area of expertise, because that's where some really interesting connections can come about, some interesting discussion can happen. Obviously it's important to go to your own industry events, or for me like tech startup events, or education, or employment or recruitment related things, but also it's equally important to just broaden your horizons and approach every situation with an open mind, because if you go in there wanting something, the other person is going to sense that, and that connection is probably dead. Because if someone did that to me, I would very easily figure that out. Tell me about yourself, tell me about what you do, let me then think about how I might or might not be able to help you, rather than immediately only speaking to me for one particular reason. So the key kind of lesson I'd say is really approach every situation with an open mind.
Thanks. That's really helpful advice. I guess big-ish questions for you to sort of wrap up the question and answer session. One of them is, how do you define success in your venture?
Okay, it's a great question. So there are some metrics which you would think would be success, which is like how many companies are using you, how many students are getting jobs, and then kind of revenue and financial figures, and they're all very important indicators. Personally, for me, it's about the impact and the difference that I'm making in the wider kind of society. So what you'll see in 2014 is internships is evolving. We are having a bigger kind of vision and product offering, which I can't go into massive detail on right now because it's very early developmental stages. But it's really about tackling this big issue of youth unemployment and the mismatch of skills. And what I'm excited about is what role can I or internships actually play in trying to tackle this big social issue. So everything that I do, and success for me is more about making that difference and leaving a legacy rather than necessarily a financial metric, because for me it's just not my motivator. Although, and saying this, actually I think most entrepreneurs would say they're not necessarily driven by money, and if money is the only thing that you are measuring, you're probably going to set yourself up for frustration, because often you find that it's very hard to monetize or get money from the outset, and the money follows once you're doing something you're really passionate about. So yes, I mean there are some basic key performance indicators around the number of jobs and people, but there's a bigger picture that drives me personally, which is around tackling some of the structural issues around education and the interaction between education and business, and helping young people in those transition periods to make the right choices, to gain the right skills, and you'll see some of that come through in 2014 as we evolve our proposition.
Great. And to kind of follow up actually on what's to come in the future, where do you see yourself and your venture in 5 years?
So we are doing various things. We're obviously focusing on internationalizing the platform. So with our partnership with Telefonica and Wyra, we're just working on German and Spanish language translation, so for those markets. And so we're looking at kind of further expansion there. We're talking to them about potentially Latin America, but also interested in further in obviously the US market as well. But we're also in 2014 expanding our proposition, as I mentioned, so that we are looking at taking the essence of an internship, which is about preparing you for the world of work, and doing that online by bringing online, offline, and experiential learning in one place. So it's quite a radical expansion of our suite of our offering, which I'm super excited about, but we'll be able to share more early in 2014 once those developments have kind of kicked off.
It sounds like some really exciting developments. We look forward to hearing more and seeing more in the coming year.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of these helpful insights and sharing your experience. And so now it's time to bring the webinar to a close. So thank you again to Raj for being with us today and sharing your story and all of this helpful kind of takeaways and insights into the world of startups. And I'd also like to thank those of you who attended for your questions and your participation. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to follow up with Raj. And if you have any questions regarding the International Youth Foundation or YouthActionNet, please email us at yan@iyfnet.org. We also invite you to join us and learn more about the work we do, so you can find us online on YouthActionNet.org, as well as Facebook and Twitter, and we look forward to staying in touch. So thank you again to everyone. Have a great day.